There is no beating around the bush here, right? Blizzard have ruined one of their flagship titles, and in doing so, the change that Blizzard has undergone in the last 18 years, it's never been more apparent. From the player-focused company that offered us some of the most polished experiences in the PC market, to the company that released Warcraft 3 Reforged. They may even have taken the crown from Bethesda, as Reforged might be one of the most incompetent major releases in modern gaming. It truly is remarkable. Of course, if you are new here, we release 6 game industry analysis videos per week, so be sure to, like, sub, all that good stuff for the algorithm. And with that, let's get into the utter mess that is Warcraft 3 Reforged. Warcraft 3 Reforged was announced at BlizzCon in 2018, and this came actually after the success of StarCraft Remastered, an update that added in some remastered graphics and a bit of technical spit and shine for modern PCs, and as a massive fan of that game, StarCraft Remastered was essentially perfect. Warcraft 3 Remastered, though, well, it was a little bit higher in its scope. Reforged was to receive a full graphical overhaul, updated models, terrain, and environments, even tweaks to the design of some levels, a new UI for today's era, along with all new modern Battle.net features and 4+ hours of Reforged cutscenes. It was originally promised to have actually had changes to keep it in line with World of Warcraft's development of the lore, including more involvement from major characters like, say, Jaina and Sylvanas. So essentially, they promised the world here. Warcraft 3 as you know it, but better in absolutely every way. It should look better, it should feel better, and it should not harm the core of Warcraft 3. They made that promise, they showed what we assumed was a reforged version of the opening cutscene, and, well, they opened up the pre-orders. Now, a reasonable $30 is what the game would cost. I think that would have been fair. $40 for the version full of cosmetics for other Blizzard games, and the $40 version also came with some cosmetic skins for hero units, which had some people rather suspicious. I mean, the game wasn't going to be out until sometime 2019, they announced, but it was already selling cosmetics. Luckily, that cosmetic fear didn't really come to pass. It wouldn't be a thing for War 3 Reforged. Unfortunately, though, every other fear did, as well as some things that we weren't even cynical enough to be afraid of in the first place. Warcraft 3 Refunded. Warcraft 3 Deforged. This game, as it was released, is the absolute antithesis of the original game and of Blizzard's ethos at that time. First off, let's talk about the promises they made and then reneged on. The most notable is the lack of story changes, and while this technically was announced via an interview with Polygon, they did talk about it at BlizzCon 2019, that was extremely late in the game's development and after pre-orders. In fact, most people had expected the game to have been released by then. And let's be real, if you're moral, you would not cancel a major feature without telling your customers ASAP, because that was one of the core parts of Reforged, but it wouldn't be there. And without those changes, the entire $30 game essentially falls back to being a visual upgrade with modern Battle.net integration. So, the lack of that is strike one. Strike two, then, is fundamentally false advertising. There were supposed to be 4 hours of Reforged cutscenes, promised after them showing a fully remade intro cinematic. Well, what ended up happening is there was 4 minutes of Reforged cutscenes. There's the intro, which is pretty nice. There's then the Arthas vs. Illidan cutscene. Now, that was one of the most memorable, important moments of Warcraft 3, and, I mean, the reforging of it, like, our upstairs office is our game development studio. We just sat there and laughed at it. Our animator barely survived the experience. The animations are stiff, the atmosphere is non-existent, and the upgraded unit models, I mean, they do nothing to help it. They are so stiff. It's quite amazing. Beyond that, though, the original cinematics from Warcraft 3, they are the same as before, but they're in 1080p instead of 240. Now, that is something that they, they did say beforehand. They said they would just be 1080p renders, but, for a game sold in 4+ hours of Reforged cutscenes, what ended up happening is completely unacceptable because of the bulk of the cutscenes. So, they were promised to look so much different to what we actually get. I mean, look at the comparison between this footage shown at BlizzCon 2018 and then the live version of the same scene at the Culling of Stratholme. Now, the BlizzCon version, it's still up on their website. It's still advertising the game, but it's not in the game. And, I mean, it's just unacceptable for $30. Yes, they promised a cinematic style of camera work for the whole thing. Dramatic cuts to characters, wide shots, close-ups, far more dynamic scenes with a lot of work. What did they actually ship with War 3 Reforged? Well, it's just like Warcraft 3, the original, the RTS camera, and some talking text boxes. So, if that's strike two, What is Strike 3? Simply put, it is all the problems. The game runs terribly, if at all, with a lot of users reporting terrible frame rates, terrible starting. We've had loads of issues. Many of the custom games are broken, there is no single-player custom game functionality, custom campaigns are missing, and a whole bunch more. Then there's the UI. It looks nothing like what was initially advertised. So again, they kind of reneged on that one. And then in keeping with the load masking menu transitions of old, well, they just feel really unresponsive. Navigating through the game like it somehow feels worse than in the classic client, which is quite impressive. There are also loads of missing features. Which ones? Well, almost every feature that the original Battle.net had, because in their move to the new Battle.net, they didn't replicate in-game player profiles, chat commands, clans, they're not there. There's no cross-region play either. The new Battle.net integration does add some features, as was advertised, but they lost far more in that transition than they actually gained. Then the EULA has also changed the end-user license agreement so that anything created in the world editor, well, that is the intellectual property of Blizzard. Yes, they're still very salty over losing Dota, but in doing this, they've pretty much guaranteed that they're never going to bottle that lightning again. It also bans the use of third-party IP in custom maps, and that theoretically kills a lot of the most, popular custom maps from back in the day. I mean, that's if the custom maps even work in the new client anyway, and even if they do work, good luck finding anyone to play with. Now, this is anecdotal, but the lunchtime Legion TD and custom hero survival that were a staple in our office a while ago, the custom games list in Reforged for some reason is way less populated and varied than it was in classic Warcraft 3. What about classic Warcraft 3? Well, this is maybe the most egregious thing of all. Classic Warcraft 3 has not escaped this nightmare, and this is the bit that's unforgivable. Even if you wanted nothing to do with Reforged, and you just wanted to play the game you already owned on Battle.net as it has been for 17 years, you're out of luck. Screw you. That's what it is. As one forum poster puts it, Reforged is a forced downgrade even for classic users. The old client is gone. Even if you have not purchased Reforged, the Battle.net client will download a useless 30 gigabytes of art assets and upgrade your game to the new UI and BNet integration. That means that the only way to play classic Warcraft 3, the one that works flawlessly, is to install an old version and to keep it as far away from the BNet client as is possible. And even then, the original Battle.net servers have been taken down, so that's only for LAN or single player. In releasing their new remastered version, Blizzard literally killed the old version of Warcraft 3. Warcraft 3, a game beloved by many and still played by many today, has been killed by Blizzard's own hands and on purpose. Obviously, players are extremely unhappy about this. The forums, the subreddit, the Metacritic, they are truly aflame, and rightly so. Last night, the user score was 2.4. This morning, 1.6. Moved down to 1.5 during this video's creation. In this case, players, they're often quite quick to ask for refunds, but that's actually a bit tricky because of customer support. They seemed to be offering refunds through support chat initially, but that has now been seeing very mixed results. One Australian user was actually denied a refund based on his time in-game, and that actually goes against Australian consumer protections, which is a big no-no. Now, according to their customer support, Australian consumer law does not override their terms of sale because they're a US company. That's simply not true. And even Valve were fined $3 million Australian dollars for misleading conduct in this area in 2018. Now, the user since contacted them with this information and has not seen any response yet, so that's an updating or an ongoing story. And the severity of this stuff, I don't think it needs to be explained any further. To put it very simply here, Blizzard have been acting in a wholly anti-consumer manner, and I think that is downright despicable. That said, though, if I actually sit down and think about the situation, well, I think the Classic Games team just did not have the resources to create an entire game, with new assets, so, this was outsourced pretty much entirely to a Malaysian studio called Lemon Sky. Now, Lemon Sky have done some work on other games like StarCraft Remastered, and their name is credited in some beautiful-looking games. They actually don't seem to be doing bad work here, and maybe it's just a case of bad direction from Blizz, so I think that blaming them is really not that fair. I think it's actually probably all on Blizz. The Classic team, they likely did want to do this game justice. Of course they love, War 3, but they were probably stuck with a shoestring budget and probably had no proper art resources to actually coordinate in an effective manner with Lemon Sky, and this is the result. It is a game that arguably looks worse than the original and feels rushed out the gate, even after a much later than expected release date. It's broken, it's battered, and the original cannot even be played in the same way anymore because they killed old BNet. And really, one Reddit user actually left an extremely on-point comment. Blizzard has always been about absolutely flawless polish. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Blizzard was a name you could trust for polish and for a focus on the player's experience. The attitude shown to Warcraft 3 Reforged is the exact opposite of the attitude that Blizzard had towards their classic beloved games. And I think we all know where the blame should be going here. The bean counters, the money people. The RTS genre is largely dead, much to, my sadness. I think they've put the final nail in this game's coffin. It's a dark time when, the absolute shining example of a classic game, is actually a Microsoft example. Age of Empires Definitive Edition, that is basically perfect. It brought everything back in the way that you would want, with so much quality of life, convenience, all of that stuff from a modern game. And having recently got into AoE HD, AoE 2 HD, and then seeing Definitive Edition, it is incredible how well Microsoft treated their classic franchise. Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition has underwent a massive amount of work, and it truly is the best version of AoE 2. It is worth every penny. The love put into that is evident, and it's all ahead of Microsoft, reviving that franchise for Age of Empires 4. And that is how you treat a franchise that people have put so much love into. Blizzard, you are an absolute embarrassment to your legacy. It is so damn obvious. And with that, I'm basically out. If you want to see the old Blizzard North team upholding classic Blizzard values, then take a look at the video that we did yesterday. And with that, thank you very much for watching. I think you'll enjoy the video we did yesterday, so be sure to check that out. Your likes are always appreciated because the YouTube algorithm. And with that, what a sad day, and I'll see you next time.